Now we're going to talk about the lathe tools. Each student that needs the tools, that don't have tools of their own, will be issued a set similar to this. Some of them are getting a little old, but the tools are still good. There are 6 tools in a set. The one that you will use first when you're turning is called a spindle roughing gouge. Now the spindle roughing gouge, its primary use is to turn a square piece of wood round. Most lathe tools have what we would call a bevel. Now the bevel is the portion of the tool that actually goes against the grinding wheel while it's being sharpened. So this would be the bevel on the spindle roughing gouge. The portion of the tool going right down the center is called the flute. There are several tools that have a flute. As I'm teaching you how to turn, and you can open a flute and close a flute. If you turn the tool up in this fashion, that has the flute closed. When you rotate the tool down, now the flute is open. And you would generally use the tool at a 45-degree angle to your tool rest, which would look something like this. So it would go against the piece of wood where the bevel itself is actually against the piece of wood. That's called riding the bevel. You will hear that about 1,000 times during this semester. But that's the spindle roughing gouge. The next tool we'll look at is called the skew. Now the skew is probably the most difficult tool to master. It is incredibly sharp, and it has what's called a long point and a short point. When it's sharpened, it has a bevel on both sides. So to sharpen this tool, you would put this side against the grinding wheel, then you would flip it over and do the other side. So it's a double bevel. The skew is used primarily to smooth a cylinder, to get a nice smooth finish on it. You can also use it to cut small grooves. You can also use it to form beads. So it's a very versatile tool. It's just a very difficult tool to master. The next one in the box is the round-nosed scraper. The scraper also has a bevel, but with a scraper you do not ride the bevel the way you do a cutting tool. This is used flat, and you generally have the tool handle raised above the tool rest when you're using a scraper. The scraper is the only tool in the set that does not cut. By its name, it's a scraper, not a cutter. This is used usually on the inside of bowls and boxes. It's most effective on end grain, which you will learn more about as we get into the class. The next tool is the parting tool. The parting tool also has a double bevel, but it's actually used flat this way against the tool rest. And the parting tool is used to establish a specific diameter on some part of a spindle. It's also used to actually part the piece completely off the lathe, thus the name parting tool. You have 2 gouges in your set. There's the bowl gouge and the spindle gouge. Now, as you look at both of them together, the spindle gouge is the smaller of the 2. It also has a much a shallower flute, if you can see on the end. The bowl gouge has a much deeper flute, and it's larger in diameter. They're sharpened exactly the same. They both have a 45-degree bevel on them, with about the same amount of cutback on the wings. Now, the bowl gouge is used on bowls, imagine that. But you would use this to cut the outside of a bowl as well as the inside. The spindle gouge is used on spindles. This is what you will use to do detail work on your spindle. Now, that's your 6 basic tools. Now, there are probably 200 or 300 specialty tools that are used on lathes. None of the projects that we will do in this class require those specialty tools. Most of the turning that you will do will be done with these 6 tools. Now, that'll do it.